The first time I saw her, the world seemed to slow down, as if time itself held its breath. It was an ordinary afternoon, the kind that usually drifts by without leaving a single memory behind. I was in the campus library, buried beneath the weight of textbooks and half-written notes, my highlighter already running out of ink. The soft hum of the air conditioner and the quiet rustle of turning pages filled the space. I had been staring at the same line of text for 10 minutes, my mind wandering, when something shifted around me. She walked in. At first, it wasn't her appearance that caught my attention, it was her laugh. A soft, melodic sound that floated through the silence, neither loud nor disruptive, but warm enough to make heads turn. My eyes lifted from my book almost instinctively, and there she was, framed by the doorway like she belonged to some secret story the rest of us hadn't been invited into. She held a single book against her chest, her arm curled around it as if it were precious. Her dark hair cascaded loosely over her shoulders, shining slightly under the fluorescent light, and her eyes carried a kind of depth that felt almost dangerous, like if I looked too long, I might lose myself. I tried not to stare, but I couldn't help it. She moved with quiet confidence, her steps unhurried, as though she knew exactly where she belonged in the world. My heart thudded unexpectedly, a heavy beat that startled me. I told myself it was nothing, just a fleeting distraction, but deep down I already knew it wasn't. Something inside me shifted in that moment, and it was terrifying in its clarity. She passed by my table, and the faint trace of her perfume reached me soft, floral, and unforgettable. For reasons I couldn't explain, it made me feel lightheaded. I dropped my gaze quickly, pretending to be deeply invested in the highlighted sentence I still hadn't read properly. My pen tapped nervously against the page, my body betraying the storm I was trying to hide. She chose a table just a few rows away, far enough to keep her in the distance, but close enough that I could still see her if I dared. And I did. I found myself stealing glances, my eyes following the way she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her lips parted slightly as she read. She seemed completely absorbed in her book, and I couldn't help but wonder what story had captured her attention. For a ridiculous moment, I was jealous of the pages she held so tenderly. It was strange, the way she made the entire room feel different. Everything else, the whispers, the shuffling papers, the endless notes in front of me, faded into the background. All I could see was her. I didn't know her name. I didn't know her voice beyond that single, beautiful laugh. But as I sat there, unable to look away, one thing became crystal clear. From the very first moment I saw her, something inside me had changed forever. For the next 20 minutes, I pretended to study while secretly watching her. Every time she turned a page, every time she tucked her hair behind her ear, I found myself memorizing the smallest details. I was almost angry with myself. Why was I so distracted by someone I didn't even know? But no matter how many times I tried to return to my notes, my gaze always drifted back to her. It felt like I was caught in some invisible thread pulling me closer, even though I hadn't moved an inch. My chest tightened each time I thought she might look up, though she never did. She was completely lost in her book, as though the rest of the world didn't exist. That made me want to know her even more. Finally, it happened. She shifted in her chair, glanced up from her book, and her eyes locked with mine. My heart stopped. It couldn't have been more than a second, maybe 2, but in that instant I felt exposed, like she could see every thought I'd had about her written across my face. Heat rushed to my cheeks, and I quickly looked down at my notebook, scribbling nonsense words just to make it seem like I was focused. My hand shook as I wrote, and I cursed myself silently for being so obvious. But then, slowly, almost teasingly, I lifted my gaze again, and she was still looking at me. Not in an awkward way, not in a judgmental way, but with the softest smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It was a smile that said she had noticed me too. The library suddenly felt too small, too quiet, as if it was holding its breath just for us. My pulse raced, and I knew I had 2 choices: hide behind my notebook and regret it forever, or be brave enough to let this moment become something more. Before I could overthink it, she stood up. My stomach dropped as I watched her gather her things, clutching her book against her chest once again. Each step she took seemed impossibly slow, and yet she reached my table far too quickly. "Hi," she said softly, her voice exactly how I imagined, warm, calm, with just enough curiosity to make my heart melt. I blinked, stunned for a moment before managing to whisper, "Hi." My voice cracked slightly, betraying the storm of emotions inside me. She tilted her head, studying me with eyes that felt like they could see right through me. "I couldn't help but notice. You've been staring at me." I froze, horrified, my face burning red. I wasn't. I stammered, fumbling for words, but she chuckled gently, saving me from drowning in embarrassment. "It's okay," she said with a smile that lit up the dim library light. "Because I was staring at you too." In that single moment, everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about fate, shifted. My heart was beating so fast I thought she might hear it. Her confession, that she had been staring at me too, left me completely unprepared. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to ask her 1,000 questions, but all I managed was a nervous smile. She pulled out the chair across from me without asking, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. The way she carried herself, so calm and assured, made me both nervous and drawn to her all at once. She placed her book on the table between us, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. "I'm Emma," she finally said, resting her chin lightly on her hand. "Emma," I repeated softly, as if the name itself was something I needed to memorize. "I'm Maya." Her smile widened at that, and I swore I saw something sparkle in her eyes, like she found my name beautiful in its own way. We sat there in silence for a moment, the library around us buzzing faintly with quiet whispers and the distant sound of pages turning. Somehow, it felt like the rest of the world had been muted, leaving only the two of us suspended in this moment. "What were you working on?" she asked, nodding toward my notebook. I glanced down at the meaningless scribbles I had written in panic earlier and felt my cheeks heat again. "Honestly? Nothing useful," I admitted with a small laugh. "I was supposed to be studying, but I got distracted." Her eyebrows arched playfully. "By me?" The way she asked it, so direct and teasing, left me speechless. I hesitated for a moment before nodding slightly, unable to lie. She leaned back in her chair, her smile softening into something gentler. "Good," she said. "Because you distracted me too." Those words hung between us, delicate and dangerous. I wasn't used to this honesty, this openness. It was terrifying, but thrilling at the same time. To ease the tension, I gestured toward her book. "What were you reading?" Emma's eyes lit up instantly as she turned the cover so I could see. "It's a collection of poems. I've read it at least 3 times, but I keep coming back to it." There was something so endearing about the way her voice softened when she spoke about the book, almost reverent. I leaned closer, curious. "You like poetry?" She nodded. "I love words. The way they can mean something different to everyone who reads them. It feels like magic, doesn't it?" I found myself smiling, not because of the book, but because of her. "Yeah," I whispered, "I think it does." It was strange how quickly she made me comfortable, how the nervousness in my chest slowly turned into warmth. We talked for what felt like hours, even though only minutes had passed, about books, classes, and little fragments of ourselves we rarely shared with strangers. But Emma didn't feel like a stranger. Not anymore. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning of something I couldn't ignore. Time slipped away without either of us noticing. What was supposed to be a quiet afternoon of studying had turned into something far more extraordinary. Emma's presence filled the space between us with a warmth I had never felt before. Every time she laughed, I felt the sound ripple through me, and every glance she gave me made the air feel heavier, charged with something I didn't know how to name. We leaned closer as we talked, our voices low but eager. She told me about her love for painting, how colors could say the things she sometimes couldn't find words for. I told her about my obsession with photography, how I loved capturing fleeting moments before they disappeared forever. It felt almost too perfect, like our passions mirrored each other, her brush creating the worlds my lens wanted to preserve. There were pauses between our words, but they weren't uncomfortable. Instead, they were filled with unspoken things, the kind of silences that said more than conversation ever could. Each time our eyes met across the table, my heart skipped in a way I couldn't control. At one point, Emma reached for her pen, and our fingers brushed. It was the lightest touch, accidental, but it sent a shiver straight up my arm. My breath caught, and I pulled back quickly, my cheeks flaming, but when I dared to look at her, she wasn't embarrassed. She was smiling again, this time softer, more knowing, like she had felt it too. "You're different," she said suddenly, her voice quiet but steady. I blinked, unsure how to respond. "Different how?" Her eyes lingered on mine, and for a moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, with a small shrug, she said, "I don't know yet. But I want to." The weight of her words sank into me, filling me with both fear and exhilaration. No one had ever said something like that to me before, not in that way. It wasn't just curiosity, it was an invitation. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "Maybe. I want to know you too." For a moment, she simply looked at me, her gaze intense but tender. Then she leaned forward slightly, resting her chin on her hand again, and smiled as though she had already decided something. "Then it's settled," she said. "We'll figure it out together." It was such a simple promise, yet it felt monumental. My heart was a storm inside my chest, and I didn't know whether to run or stay forever. We ended up leaving the library together when it closed, walking side by side under the soft glow of the street lamps. Our shoulders brushed now and then, and every accidental touch felt like a spark I couldn't ignore. The night was cool, the world around us quiet, and I knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was, whatever it would become, it had already changed me. The night we left the library together stayed with me. Even though we had only just met, walking beside Emma felt strangely natural, as though we had been doing it forever. The rhythm of her steps matched mine, and though our shoulders brushed every so often, neither of us pulled away. Each touch sent tiny sparks racing beneath my skin, and I knew she felt them too. When we reached the main street, she turned to me. "Do you want to grab some coffee? There's a little cafe still open down the road." The invitation startled me, but I nodded almost instantly. "Yeah, I'd like that." The cafe was quiet, lit by the warm glow of hanging lights, with the faint hum of music filling the air. We sat by the window, 2 mugs of steaming coffee between us, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe. Conversation came so easily, like we weren't strangers at all. We talked about our families, our dreams, the places we wanted to travel to. She wanted to see Paris someday. I wanted to stand under the northern lights. At one point, Emma leaned across the table, her eyes bright. "Maybe we'll go together." The casual way she said it made my chest tighten. It wasn't a promise, not really, but the thought of a future where she was by my side was enough to make me smile for the rest of the night. The hours slipped away without us noticing. When the cafe finally announced its closing, we laughed at how late it had gotten. Stepping back into the cool night, the city lights glowing around us, everything felt different, like the world was softer, quieter, just for us. We walked slowly, not ready for the night to end. At one point, she stopped and looked at me with that same unreadable expression she had given me in the library. "You know," she said softly, "I don't usually connect with people this fast." I swallowed hard, my heart fluttering. "Me neither." Her lips curved into that familiar smile, the one that seemed to see right through me. For a long moment, we just stood there, the silence between us louder than words. My chest rose and fell with a nervous rhythm, but I didn't want to move. I didn't want to break whatever this was. When she finally walked me home, she lingered at the steps to my building. Neither of us wanted to say goodbye, but the hesitation only made the moment heavier. She tucked her hair behind her ear, her eyes holding mine in a way that made my breath catch. "I'll see you tomorrow," she asked, her voice hopeful. I smiled, trying not to show how much it meant to me. "Yeah, tomorrow." And as I watched her walk away, I realized something I could no longer deny. Emma wasn't just someone I had noticed in the library. She was becoming someone I didn't want to live without. The days that followed felt brighter than usual. Emma and I began spending more and more time together, almost without planning it. A coffee after class turned into study sessions, which turned into walks around campus late into the evening. It wasn't long before I started waiting for her messages, smiling at my phone whenever her name lit up my screen. Being with her felt easy, effortless, like slipping into a rhythm I didn't even know I'd been missing. She had a way of pulling me out of my shell, asking questions no one had ever asked me before. When I spoke, she listened, not just with her ears, but with her whole presence, as if every word I said mattered. And yet, beneath the comfort of our growing friendship, there was something else, something simmering quietly between us. I felt it in the way my chest fluttered when she leaned too close, in the way my skin tingled when her hand brushed mine. I told myself it was nothing, that I was imagining things, but deep down I knew better. One afternoon, we were sitting on the grass outside the library, books spread between us, but long forgotten. The autumn sun was warm, and the air smelled faintly of fallen leaves. Emma lay on her back, her hands behind her head, staring at the clouds. "Do you ever think about destiny?" she asked suddenly, her voice thoughtful. I looked at her, the way the sunlight traced the edges of her face, making her look almost unreal. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Why?" She turned her head to meet my eyes, and for a heartbeat, I forgot to breathe. "Because meeting you feels like it wasn't an accident." The words hit me like a rush of wind, stealing the air from my lungs. I laughed nervously, trying to hide the way my heart was pounding. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" she asked, grinning. "It's true." I shook my head, but my cheeks were burning. To cover it, I picked up one of the books and waved it at her. "You're impossible." She laughed, that soft melodic sound that had first drawn me to her. "And you love it," she teased. I didn't deny it. I couldn't. That evening, when we finally packed our things and walked side by side down the path, I caught myself wishing the walk would never end. Every step felt like it was carrying me closer to something I wasn't sure I was ready for, but couldn't stop wanting. At my building, she stopped like before, lingering. There was that silence again, thick with words neither of us dared to say. She gave me a small smile, one that made my chest ache. "Good night, Maya," she whispered. And as I watched her disappear down the street, I realized that friendship was no longer a strong enough word for what we were becoming. By the third week of knowing Emma, I had stopped pretending. She wasn't just a friend, not anymore. Every look, every laugh, every touch lingered too long, carrying weight I couldn't ignore. And yet, neither of us had said the words aloud. We danced carefully around the truth, as though speaking it might shatter the delicate world we were building together. One evening, we found ourselves in her apartment for the first time. She had invited me over after class, promising she would cook dinner. The place was small but warm, filled with the scent of fresh basil and something baking in the oven. Books were stacked on nearly every surface, paintings leaned against the walls, half finished as though she couldn't stop creating. It felt like stepping into her mind, a place both chaotic and beautiful. As she moved around the kitchen, humming softly to herself, I sat on the counter, pretending to help but mostly watching her. The sight of her barefoot in an oversized sweater, her hair tied messily, was enough to undo me. She was so effortlessly herself, and I was so hopelessly drawn to her. At one point, she turned to hand me a spoon to taste the sauce. Our fingers brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away. The contact lingered, warm and steady, until she finally whispered, "You feel it too, don't you?" My breath caught. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in her eyes I saw the truth reflected back at me. My voice was barely audible when I replied, "Yes." The silence that followed was thick, almost unbearable. My heart hammered against my ribs, afraid of what would come next, afraid of what I had just admitted. But then Emma smiled, not her playful grin, not the teasing smirk I had grown used to, but something softer, more vulnerable. "I was starting to think I was imagining it," she said quietly. I shook my head. "You're not." Something shifted then, something irreversible. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier. Every inch between us felt like a distance I couldn't bear anymore. She stepped closer, her hand still holding the spoon but forgotten, her eyes locked on mine. We didn't kiss, not yet. Instead, she reached up and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, her fingertips lingering on my skin. The touch was gentle, but it burned in the best way. My eyes fluttered shut for a second, and when I opened them again, she was still watching me, her expression unreadable but full of meaning. "Dinner's going to burn," she whispered with a shaky laugh, breaking the tension just enough to pull us both back to earth. But the truth was out now. There was no going back to pretending. That night, as we sat across from each other eating slightly overcooked pasta, our knees brushed under the table, and neither of us moved away. Every moment was charged, fragile, and breathtaking. I went home with the taste of her words still lingering on my lips. "You feel it too, don't you?" After that night in Emma's apartment, nothing was the same. We still met for coffee, still studied side by side, still laughed like before, but every glance carried a new weight, every touch lasted just a little longer. It was as though we had stepped onto a fragile bridge between friendship and something more, and neither of us dared to retreat. One evening, we went for a walk through the park. The air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the leaves crunched beneath our feet. The world around us glowed golden under the street lamps, but all I could see was her. She walked close enough that our arms brushed, her hand swinging just a breath away from mine. Each time it happened, my pulse jumped, but I didn't move. I wanted her hand to find mine. We stopped by the fountain, its water glistening under the moonlight. Emma leaned against the stone edge, her eyes on the ripples, but I knew she wasn't really watching. She was thinking about us, about the unspoken things hanging between us. "Maya," she said finally, my name soft on her lips. She turned to me, and for a moment, she just stared, as if searching for the right words. I don't want to pretend anymore. My breath caught. Pretend what? I asked, though I already knew. That this is just friendship. Her honesty hit me like a wave, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I felt my throat tighten, my heart racing so fast I thought it might give me away. But then I looked at her, at the way her eyes searched mine with both fear and hope, and I knew I couldn't deny it any longer. "It's not," I whispered. "It hasn't been for a while." The silence that followed was different from all the others before. It wasn't heavy, it wasn't awkward. It was freeing, like a door had finally been opened. Emma took a step closer, her breath visible in the cold night air. "Then tell me I'm not crazy for wanting to do this." Before I could ask what she meant, her hand found mine, warm and steady, and my entire body lit up at the contact. I didn't let go. Instead, I squeezed her hand, grounding us both. "You're not crazy," I said, my voice trembling. "I've been waiting for you to." And then it happened, the moment that changed everything. She leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. But I didn't. I couldn't. When her lips finally met mine, the world disappeared. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like we were testing the waters of something we already knew ran deep. But as my hand moved to her cheek and hers tightened around mine, it deepened into something I had never felt before, something real, something certain. When we finally pulled away, our foreheads rested together, both of us breathless and smiling like fools. "The first time I saw you," she whispered, "I think I already knew." So had I.